So welcome to our last Miles Masterclass of the Spring 2020 season. This is our grand finale, and I'm Betsy Ludwig, Executive Director of Women's Entrepreneurship at Northeastern University. And before I introduce our very special guests, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who has made this Miles season a success. For those who don't know, Miles is an acronym for Masterclasses in Innovation, Leadership, and Entrepreneurship. And when we conceived these masterclass series at the end of March, the world was filled with unprecedented uncertainty, disease, economic meltdown, and no one knew exactly what to do or how to react. But in the chaos, our team saw some certainty, and we saw the certainty of our community, and we immediately understood that we needed to support female founders now more than ever. We saw grit, we saw resilience, and a new term I just learned, which is anti-fragility, the ability to come out of a crisis stronger than you were before it. We knew we had an amazing group of women doing fabulous things in their fields in and around Northeastern, and quickly realized we could leverage the huge Northeastern platform to give these women a voice to inspire the community and further their business goals. Whatever the scenario, we know that no one's life was the same as it had been beforehand, and that the commonality of that experience has bonded us together. So over the last 2 months, we've hosted 10 masterclasses featuring over 20 amazing women in 2020. We covered topics ranging from global fintech to opportunities in healthcare, to self-compassion, to design thinking, how to build a side hustle, how to demystify your financing your startup, the importance of building a community as a cornerstone to entrepreneurial resilience, and now today, humanizing technology. So I just want to thank everyone for your participation, either as a member of the audience, a speaker, a coordinator, or just a cheerleader. It takes a village, and we really have one here. As always, this format is very informal. We encourage active participation from the audience through the chat, and please remember to mute your microphones. As an added bonus today, Rana is giving away some copies of her book to active chat participants, so we really encourage you to ask your questions. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have two amazing powerhouse women in the computer science field. I have to admit, I'm completely out of my depth on this topic. We're joined by Rana el Kaliouby, who's a Ph.D., CEO, and co-founder of Affectiva, and author of Decoded. She's an academic turned entrepreneur, and she will share her take on being a founder in a white and male-dominated field in her quest to humanize technology. I want to just take a minute to read a review that's in her book. Here it is. Almost read it. And it says, written with kindness, vulnerability, and grace, Girl Decoded reveals the tour de force that is Rana el Kaliouby. Her must-read memoir spurs technologists to follow their conscience and emboldens women all over the globe to fight for their dreams. That's by Dr. Kate Darling, and I thought that was just really a really nice review. She's joined by Northeastern's amazing Dean of the Corey College of Computer Sciences, Carla Broadley. Prior to joining Northeastern, Dean Broadley was a professor at Tufts University and Purdue University, and her interdisciplinary machine learning research has led to advances not only in computer and information science, but in areas including remote sensing, neuroscience, digital libraries, astrophysics, content-based image retrieval of medical images, computational biology, chemistry, evidence-based medicine, and predictive medicine. So please join me today in welcoming these awesome speakers for a nice chat, and I turn it over to you, Carla.
Thank you for that. I like to say maybe I have the attention span of a gnat, which is why I've needed to collaborate with so many different fields. But actually, I believe that new machine learning algorithms are invented through the necessity of trying to make things work in a new domain. I have so many questions to ask you, but let's start with just tell us about your company and what it does and who's using the software and why you started it. It's really 3 questions.
Well, first I want to just start by thanking Betsy and you, Carla, for doing this. I'm very excited. I've gotten to know Northeastern in a number of ways. First, through collaborating with Professor Matthew Goodwin. We go all the way back to when I was at MIT Media Lab. And, you know, he got me, and I'll talk about some of the work we did in autism, but also we have a number of co-ops that have interned with us over the last few years, and they end up, I think we have an amazing track record of hiring these people, including a few women too, in computer science. So I'm just very grateful for this collaboration and this partnership between my company and Northeastern. So I'm in the field of humanizing technology, and basically at a high level, technology has a lot of cognitive intelligence, a lot of IQ, but very little emotional intelligence. When we think of AI, for example, artificial intelligence, it's all about automation and efficiency and productivity, but nobody's really thinking about the human-centric elements. Can technology help us be more connected, help us be more empathetic? And what would that world look like? So my background is I'm a computer scientist. I studied computer science as an undergraduate at the American University in Cairo. And from then on did my PhD at Cambridge University, focused on using computer vision and machine learning to build emotionally intelligent technology. And then I had the opportunity to join Professor Rosalind Picard's lab at MIT Media Lab to apply this emotion recognition technology first to autism. And that's how I collaborated with Matthew Goodwin. And then later that provided the impetus for starting Affectiva so that we can apply this technology to many industries around the world, including automotive, mental health, and other areas. So it's been quite the journey of kind of taking a core technology that I feel very passionate about and then bringing it to the world through Affectiva.
So how do companies use the products? How do they, if they buy your software, can you give a couple of different use cases?
Yeah, one of the very first use cases was around quantifying how people respond to content online. So we're all consuming all sorts of content, and we are now able to quantify through people's facial expressions moment by moment what their experience is like. And that product is in 90 countries around the world, and it's used by, the Fortune 500 companies. More recently, we've been really focused on the automotive industry, where our technology is being used to identify distracted drivers and drowsy drivers and what's happening inside the car. So a lot of computer vision and a lot of deep learning and machine learning. And then another area that I'm super passionate about, which I think kind of overlaps with your interests, Carla, as well, is this idea of a sensing platform to advance mental health, our quantification, objective longitudinal quantification of mental health. We do a lot of work, or we partner with companies that are focused on autism, and we've done a little bit of work around depression and Parkinson's.
So I have a question, which I don't know if it's possible. I've been thinking about your software, and it's so interesting and so cool. And, we've all moved to an online environment. I'm wondering if let's say you're teaching and you have a whole bunch of little boxes of people. Would there be a way to use your software to tell who's confused and who's bored and who's multitasking? So you could call on the student who's multitasking, or if somebody is confused, you could say, so-and-so, do you have a question? It would just help you as a person, particularly if you're a faculty member who's not so good at reading facial expressions.
I think there's a huge use case for this technology now that we're all migrated into this virtual universe, right? Because as you said, when you're presenting, I've been doing a lot of these book talks because my book tour had to pivot to a virtual book tour. So I give a lot of these talks, and often it looks like this. There's 100+ people. I can't see you all, which I ordinarily would have if you and I, Carla, were doing this, live together physically. We would riff off of the audience's energy, but we can't do that right now. And so we have no idea if our audience is engaged. Are they bored to death? Are they rolling their eyes? Are they totally confused? Right? And I feel like it's broken that iterative feedback loop that is so necessary when you're engaging an audience, whether you're an instructor or a presenter. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. And what's cool about it is you don't actually have to turn your camera on. You just need to give the algorithm access to the technology, and it can just anonymize your emotional engagement and make that available to a teacher. So I think
it might be a little disconcerting when it says 55% of your class wishes they were anywhere but here, which is obviously not, I'm sure, happening here. So moving to a slightly different direction, I think this is really exciting. Moving to a slightly different direction, I think about you and your life of doing a startup. I know you're a mom, and how on earth did you find the time and motivation to write your book?
The real answer is I don't really, I feel like you make time for the things you're really passionate about. Yeah, so I obviously I'm the CEO of Affectiva. I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids. My daughter's 17 and my son is 11, and they're very engaged in kind of, I often talk about Affectiva as my 3rd kid. So it's very much integrated in our family, my work is. And I just really felt that this was a unique opportunity to tell my story and use it as a platform to inspire others.
So what parts of your story would you like to share, since you can't share all of it? Can you talk a little bit about what's so, I know that you have a very unusual pathway into tech, certainly, and have done many amazing things. Can you talk a little bit about, how you got into tech? What is it about your story that you wanted to share with us?
I would say the number one thing that I want to share through this book is I have had a lot of inner doubt throughout my journey, and this voice in my head, I call it the Debbie Downer voice in my head, that basically kept saying over and over again, you can't do this, you won't be able to raise money, you can't start a company, you're a woman, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I have come to, the voice is still there, but I've learned how to negotiate with it and kind of say, okay, I hear you. Right. So I think one story in particular, I grew up in the Middle East, so kind of a lot of cultural and societal norms are deeply ingrained in my brain around what a woman, for example, can and can't do. And then, of course, I'm in the tech community, which is very, very male dominated. And so as a result, I'm very passionate about diversity, and I want to talk to you about that, because I know that's something you care deeply about as well. But when we started Affectiva, Ross Picard, who's my co-founder and mentor and role model, we both, when we were raising our initial round of funding, we agreed that we would hire a business executive to run the company. And I was the chief technology officer. A few years in, he moved on, and the question became, okay, who's going to be the next CEO? And a couple of our board members said, well, Rana should be, it's her company, it's her technology. And I was just too scared. I was like, I've never been a CEO before. I don't know if I can do this. And I didn't raise my hand. At the same time, our head of sales at the time basically said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And he took the job. And so he became the CEO of the company.
I did not realize.
Yeah, for a couple of years. And then in 2015, it was right after I gave my TED Talk, and I went back to Boston, and with a lot of nudging and help from mentors around me, I basically went to him and I said, I actually want to be the CEO of this company. And I Googled, like, what are the roles and responsibilities of a CEO? And I found that I was already doing them. We had raised $50 million for the company. I was at the forefront of all of that. I led the majority of the team. So I was doing the job. And it took a lot of courage to kind of get outside of my comfort zone and convince myself first. Once I convinced myself, it was so easy to convince the board and the rest of the team that I can do this. So this story, was 4 years ago. I've been CEO for the last 4 years. And yeah, my advice to, other females on my team, but not just females, right? Like don't let this voice in your head be your biggest obstacle, right? Don't be your own biggest obstacle.
I think that's just a wonderful example of that you need to overcome those voices. I'll just share a quick personal anecdote, which is, when I took the job as dean, I had the same feeling as a parent, which is sometimes I'd look at the kids and think, when's the real parent going to show up? And I remember when I took my job as dean, at the end of the year, I was thanking all of my associate deans, and I shared with them that I had the same feeling sometimes. It's like, when's the real dean going to show up? Because I'm just acting like the dean. And then after a while, you grow into your role, and you can't even imagine why those voices were talking to you. And as new challenges present them, you're just excited about them rather than scared. And so I would say that I think it's lovely to share that when you've gotten to a place where you're in a position of leadership, so that people who are the young people on the Zoom meeting today can realize that that voice is inside of all of us, whether we're male or female, telling us we're not sure that we're good enough for a particular role. And that if it isn't, you're not excited enough about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way. So you must be, I mean, you are also a minority as a dean, or even as in the senior leadership of a computer science department. So how have you navigated that? And I guess, what does that mean in terms of your and the college's commitment to diversity and inclusion?
So I'll say that when I started out as an undergraduate in computer science, the statistics were really different. 40% of my classes was female when I was an undergraduate. I went to McGill University, and it was a joint program with math, and a lot of the math students were women, and they decided to do this new thing called computer science. And then, I got to graduate school, and of course the demographics changed remarkably. And then when I went to become faculty at Purdue, I was the third woman to be hired out of 70 faculty in ECE, the 12th in all of engineering ever to have been hired in engineering out of 220, and the very first person to have children during the tenure process. So there was definitely, I remember thinking very strategically, first of all, about what I would say yes to, because I was asked to be on every committee. And then I invented a statement which has served me well when I would be in large committee meetings, and I would be both an assistant professor and a woman. I learned a phrase which I share with graduate students, which is, and this works for men too, this isn't a gender specific thing. It usually works for people who are not in a position of power somehow in a group. Thank you, Joe, for re-expressing my idea such that everyone could appreciate it.
Love it.
And it has humor, and it deals with the situation head on of what just happened to you, and you don't sound complainy or whiny. But I would say that the main motivation for my becoming a dean, and I shared this yesterday on an all college forum around thinking about, and where we had 4 wonderful students talk about their experiences in Corey, being students of color, and it was eye-opening. And but I talked a little bit in that panel about why I became a dean. So I had been working on efforts to increase the diversity in tech as a volunteer for decades. And when I was offered the dean opportunity at Northeastern, I thought to myself, this is an opportunity to have a national platform with which to debug ideas and then bring them to the rest of the country. And that is what I've been focusing on since I became dean of our college. And our the tagline that goes with our university is computer science for everyone. And that means everyone should feel welcome in computer science, and computer science affects every other discipline that there is. And so a lot of our programs are designed with both of those in mind. What I get to ask, if we get to take turns, because I have so many things I want to ask you. And I've heard my own stuff so many times that, if I could look at, if you could look at my face, I'm not bored talking about my own programs, but I'm so much more interested in you. Tell me a little bit about how you have approached diversity, in your company. Obviously, you don't have the problem that you can't read facial expressions of people of diverse backgrounds, because I'm pretty sure that you address that specifically. But how else do you address these issues and advocate?
Yeah, I like to say that for us, diversity is not just the right thing to do, it's a business imperative. Because for me, ensuring that our algorithms aren't biased, right? Like our algorithms work. I mean, we're deployed in 90 countries around the world, so we cannot afford for our technology to be trained on a homogeneous set of like older white guys, and then you run it on somebody that looks like me, and it just falls flat on its face. So that it's not going to work. So we have to make sure that our data is diverse, and we have to make sure that our team is diverse, because we design for what we know, and we all have our own blind spots. So the more different voices you have around the table, the better the solution, the end solution is going to be. So for us, diversity is obviously gender diversity, ethnic diversity, but even diversity of age. We have a really kind of robust summer internship program, and our commitment to bringing co-ops. Jordan, I can see, Jordan is on our team, and I can see him like really acknowledging that. It's really important to bring these younger voices to the table, because you know, they obviously grew up with a very different experience of technology, and it's going to affect them the most, everything we're doing today. And also diversity of perspectives too. Like, you don't have to be a machine learning scientist to contribute and be a productive team member. In fact, we welcome different voices. So that's very important to us too. And yeah, and then like you, I kind of, because I'm very passionate about this, I fork out some of my time to volunteer. So I'm on the All Raise steering committee for Boston. It's a nonprofit organization committed to supporting female founders, but also female investors. And we've been very active. And, you know, I feel very fortunate to be part of that organization as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I think, and if anything, the age diversity is something that's very lacking in tech, in that you often don't have older people. The young people are easy, but like when I walk to Google, you know, I feel positively decrepit. There's all these 23-year-olds walking very importantly with their laptops across the Google campuses. So
yeah, I think that the diversity is really critical, including age diversity and this inclusiveness too, right? Like, it's not enough to just be diverse. It's even more important to make sure that your diverse team feels that they have an equal voice, right? And that's we've been talking a lot about that internally at the company too. How do we make sure we're an inclusive team and that every voice is welcomed? I mean, I was curious. I mean, you have a program. The way I kind of internalize it, it's like democratizing access to computer science. So you have a program where you don't have to be a computer scientist to enroll in this program. Can you say a little bit more about that?
sure. So we started a master's in computer science for people who did not study computer science. And Betsy, we are going to have room for you if you're ever interested. I know it will demystify how hard tech is if you come into the program. And it's basically 2 semesters of very accelerated undergraduate material, although you're not with the undergraduates, because, you know, no 29-year-old wants to sit in a room with 18-year-olds, and the average age in the program is actually late 20s. So you do 2 semesters of basically about 2/3 of an undergraduate degree in 2 semesters. So that is pretty hard. And then you join our direct entry master's students to finish up the 3 semesters of classes that you need to take to complete the master's program. Often you go out on 1 or 2 work experiences, hopefully at your company. And the people who enroll, about 1/3 come from STEM, 1/3 come from business, and 1/3 come from the liberal arts, which is really exciting. And so we are focused both on diversity of demographics, but also diversity of thought. So you get people who maybe studied English or journalism or sports medicine, and then they come and they get a tech degree, and it's called Align for 2 reasons. The first is you didn't make a mistake in what you studied as an undergraduate. Mm-hmm. Anything you studied is fine. Let's align that to tech. And second, it's about aligning the tech industry to population norms. So our enrollment goals are to mirror the population statistics of who graduates from university in this country. So 50% women, about 85% domestic students, and of the domestic students, 25% underrepresented minorities, which are all minorities except for Asian Americans. And, you know, we're pretty close to those statistics. And we are really excited about the program. We want to make a master's in computer science like an MBA, something you can do after any undergraduate degree. And why did we create this program? Partially because I was an English major when I started McGill University and then discovered computer science. And I thought about what would my life have been like if I didn't discover computer science. I would have been so sad because I love this field so much. But most importantly, and I apologize to anyone on this call who is 17, but we can't leave it in the hands of 17-year-olds who goes into tech, because 17-year-olds like myself might choose English as a rebellion because her parents suggested that she do math. And the rebellion was more important than acknowledging that maybe they were right, given that I ended up with a math computer science degree, which I then said, you were right, to my wonderful parents.
But I think it is, it's funny because I have a 17-year-old daughter, and I don't know if it's rebellion or what, but she refuses to think of herself as a STEM human being at all. She's very interested in international relations and political science, which is great. But I think there's room for this interdisciplinary kind of state of the world where you combine different disciplines. I mean, I tell a lot of young people who kind of come our way, there's a need for combining humanities and computer science because we need to think about AI ethics, right? So how is Northeastern approaching that?
So over half of the majors in Corey College of Computer Sciences, and we're at about 2,000, maybe actually 2,300, I think, with the newest class coming in. Over half of them do what's called a combined major, which is not a double major. It's where you take about 2/3 of classes in English, 2/3 classes in computer science, and then there's some programs that some classes that put them together in the digital humanities. And so we have 36. And so we've combined with the obvious ones like biology and physics and design, and the non-obvious like philosophy and journalism and criminology. With our cybersecurity program. And I will say that the number of women is higher in the combined degrees. 36% of the combined degrees are women versus 23% of just doing one of the computer science degrees. And furthermore, your point about ethics is so important. We are infusing ethics curriculum into 6 of our undergraduate classes rather than having it be a standalone, because it really needs to be integrated into the material. That's really important. We are also creating a new course with social sciences and humanities that will fulfill a general ed requirement, which we call ENUPATH, which looks at what is going on in terms of tech and diversity. So there'll be things on, bias in machine learning, things about the culture of tech right now, all of the things surrounding that, that we're really excited about. And that was actually a suggestion from a student in my inbox in the last 2 weeks, and it was brilliant. So we got right on it, and we're working on it. So ideas can come from anywhere. I don't have to have them all. I just need to be able to recognize them. Okay, I'm going to turn the tables and ask you another question. And then Betsy, I don't know when you want us to open up for questions. I know that there's quite a few. So I would like to ask you one more question, which is, tell us a vignette from your book that really exemplifies why you wanted to write the book.
Ooh. That is a hard question. Okay, the one story that comes to mind, the one story that comes to mind is when we were raising money for the company in the early days. So this is 2009. Roz and I had just decided to spin Affectiva out of MIT, and we had this trip lined up to do a Sandhill Road show. So Sandhill Road, for those who don't know, is kind of a road in the Bay Area, and it's basically just filled with venture capitalists after venture capitalists.
It's where the money is.
It's where the money is, exactly. And we had lined up like maybe 20 plus meetings with these VCs, and it took a while to line them up, right? So it was a big deal. Now at the time, my son was about 7 months old. And I don't have any family in this country, so he had to join along. And I had lined up a babysitter for him so that I could drop him off in the morning, go do my pitches, and then pick him up. And that one day she called and she said, I'm not feeling well, can't take your son. I was like, what? So I had a decision, right? I could have canceled the meetings, but these were really important. And so I decided to bring him along. So I put him in his car seat, and here we are. Roz and I would walk into the VC's office, and I just would plop him. There's usually a really kind looking person sitting at the front desk, and I'd say, here you go, like, take care of Adam. I'll just go pitch and come back. And so I did that. And to me, this kind of perseverance and grit and just finding a path through, like dealing with obstacles as they come your way and just finding a way through these obstacles, really kind of in a way summarizes my life and why I wrote the book. There are so many examples of these obstacles in all of our lives, and we have a decision to either just turn back, right? Give up and turn back, or like power through. And I just power through. So
I love that story. While Betsy, you're looking for questions, I'll just share that I don't have nearly as good a story, but I did have my 10-year-old on a snow day come to my machine learning class. And I told him that when I did this, I wanted him to raise his hand and ask the following question. His question was, why is the conjugate gradient an exponential? And it was just hilarious because the entire class was like, what? Professor Bodley's son understands what an exponential distribution and a conjugate gradient? And then all of a sudden they got it and they all laughed. But so you can have more fun with your kid coming to work than you can imagine.
That's awesome. Is he a machine learning scientist?
He is actually at Northeastern doing a double major in theater and computer science.
Cool.
He'll be a great person for you to hire. All right. He gets emotion, and he can do computer science. Betsy, do you want to start giving questions for random?
Yes, thank you so much. God, I love those stories, and I can't even spell what you just said your son said. So we have amazing questions in the chat, and they cover everything from the importance of EQ to privacy, ethics, diversity, data bias, how the COVID crisis factors in. And so there are a couple of people I'm just going to call on to ask their question. And I think Bethany Edmonds, who might be joining us from the West Coast. Bethany, are you there? And do you want to ask your question?
Sure. So my question is, have you encountered difficulty explaining the value of EQ to software developers? And if so, how have you approached that? Because I teach computer science, and I find that sometimes not everybody sees the value of it. And how have you, especially you're pitching it and you know VCs, how do they get it?
Yeah, so the first, I've been doing this for 20 years and first in academia and now in business. When we were pitching the company, we avoided using the word emotions altogether. We called it the E word and we danced around it. So this is why the company is called Affectiva, because affect is a synonym of emotions. In our first decks, we talked about, sentiment and arousal and valence, never the word emotion. But I think the world has changed. And especially now with everybody going through this global pandemic, I feel like there's a rediscovery of the importance of empathy and empathetic leadership and empathetic approach to design and human-centric. People are craving a human connection, and they understand that our emotions drive a lot of our decision making, and our memory and our health and well-being. So I think the world has changed since we were initially pitching. And there's people of all sorts see the value of EQ.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany.
And then we have a few questions that are around the use of the facial recognition software. And I'm trying to kind of digest a few questions here without a lot of understanding of AI. But talk about the facial recognition, some of the ethics, some of the privacy concerns, and then diversity issues of reading facial expressions of people with different backgrounds, races, ethnicities, and how you might be dealing with that from a technical standpoint?
Yeah, so we at Affectiva, we like to talk about the ethical development and the ethical deployment of AI. So from an ethical development perspective, we're committed to ensuring that our algorithms are not biased against any particular subpopulation. You may have seen in the news, especially recently, that a lot of the kind of tech giants have made a decision not to apply facial recognition in specific kind of for the government or in policing. One reason is because a lot of these technologies are biased against people of color, and especially women of color, because they're not trained with a very diverse data set. So that's a big issue in the industry. At Affectiva, we have veered away from any industry or use case where people do not give explicit consent. So we have turned away millions of dollars of business in the surveillance space and in this kind of security space. Because I think, you know, we just acknowledge that this data is very personal and it could be abused if it's put in the wrong hands, and we don't want to go there.
And there's some questions about bias in the recording of this data, and can you talk about that, and does that dovetail into this issue?
It does. I mean, the core. When I was a PhD student, for example, you know, over 20 years ago, when you approach the machine learning problem, you just talked about a data set in its entirety, and you reported on accuracy scores at the data set level. That unfortunately means that if it's biased towards a particular subset of the data, you won't see that in this like aggregate accuracy score. So now the industry is moving towards an approach where you're very thoughtful about your training data sets and sampling examples that cover age, gender, ethnicity, people with glasses, people wearing the hijab, right? Like the broader the data set, the better. But also when we look at the validation or the test set, we look at accuracy scores within each category. So we look at, you know, a breakdown of how our classifiers do based on gender, how they do based on different ethnic groups. And I won't kind of pretend that it's a done deal. This is very state of the art. The industry is moving very fast, and Affectiva is at the forefront of advocating for these best practices. And we have a lot of work to do, but we're committed. We're committed to it, and we prioritize it as a team, right? Like we are putting some mind share to ensuring that we look at these diversity breakdowns for our accuracy. But it's an industry, like the whole industry needs to move in that direction.
Right, and just my own personal question. So you mentioned that you're doing a lot in the automotive sector, which is on your website. What other applications do you see for your software? Where are the next verticals you're going to go into?
I'll talk about one that I'm very passionate about. Again, Matthew, who's on the line, will recognize this. So the very first application of this technology that we explored was in autism, where we were able to prototype kind of a Google Glass-like device that could give real-time feedback to individuals on the autism spectrum to improve their nonverbal skills. Since then, we have partnered with a company called BrainPower, and they use Google Glass in our technology, and they're now in the midst of clinical trials. But to broaden it, the application of emotion AI in mental health is really potentially transformative. When you walk into a doctor's office today, you don't ask, you know, the doctor doesn't ask you like, okay, Betsy, what's your temperature? Or tell me your blood pressure. They just measure it, right? There are objective measures for these, you know, important health signals, but in emotions or mental health, the gold standard is still a survey, like on a scale from 1 to 10, how depressed are you? Or how suicidal are you? And that's just like, we should be able to bring data to this problem and quantify this longitudinally and remotely from people's homes. So I think that's an area that's really ripe for a lot of innovation. Yeah, and it could be really transformative.
That feeds into another question I've seen on the chat from Jessica Sue. I don't know if she's here and she wants to ask her a question about the new roles that Affectiva might play with COVID. Jessica, are you there?
Hi, yes, thank you for this opportunity. I'm an incoming freshman at Northeastern, and my question is, will Affectiva's technology take on new roles in recovering from COVID-19, whether it comes in the form of helping people with trauma or anxiety, or addressing some of the concerns with the general sentiment of like growing up, social distancing, and usually people see that technology is bad for social skills of the new generation. How does EQ come into context in COVID-19?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Jessica, and congratulations to, I'll start with the first part of your question. I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially now that we've all been catapulted into this universe where a lot is happening virtually, including telemedicine. So again, I think there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate kind of emotion recognition technology in telehealth to quantify anxiety, stress through just a camera sensor, and remote physiological sensing. Like we can actually measure like your heart rate and your breathing rate just using a webcam. And so imagine if every time you're on your phone or on your device with your permission, we have access to that data, and that data becomes available to your physician, even outside of the small amount of time that you're connected to your doctor. So I think there's a lot of use cases there. But even beyond that, again, we're all connecting virtually, and I'm so grateful to technology for allowing us to do that, like yay Zoom, right? But it's really crude. I feel like this is V0.1 of this kind of technology, and we're going to see a lot of innovation that sits on top, that provides analytics and real-time kind of data around emotion engagement and student engagement, and will allow personalization of these experiences, and ultimately create more of a sense of a shared experience. I think that's what we're all craving. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation. Maybe some of it will come from people like you, Jessica, because we need all kind of creative minds around the table.
I just want to interject with one question I saw on the chat, Betsy, which is, are you still hiring co-ops for starting in July? I think that there's some interest in whether or not you have any more open co-op positions. Our next session, as you know, starts July 1st.
So we do not, however, we're just about to announce our summer training program, and it's a 5-week program that ends with a makeathon, where you will get assigned to, some of the project ideas span telehealth and automotive and other use cases like virtual, live streaming and video conferencing. So if you're interested, what is the best email? Email Rana at affectiva.com, and I'll make sure that I point you to the right application.
Rana, it's Gabby. Sorry to interject. I just posted our flyer about the program in the chat. So if folks scroll up, it's sitting there. And we'd love folks to consider it and apply if they're interested.
And actually, we have a call for trainees, but we also have a call for mentors. So if you're a computer science undergrad or graduate student who's interested in mentoring some of the the younger trainees, please reach out as well.
Excellent. Oh, I love this. Great. Now we have lots of questions from Brianne McDonough, and I don't know if you're there and you want to ask some of your questions about diversity of thought.
I'll ask that one. So you talked a little bit about how this technology can help people, say, on the autism spectrum. Can you also share how it accounts for this difference in people that might be, if I'm logging in and the technology is being applied to me, and how does it account for people that have limited expression, or like, for example, somebody with a stroke that may only be able to use half of their expressive muscles in their face. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
This is an excellent, and this is why, again, this is an example of how diversity of thought really is important. We do not have enough examples in our data set, Brianne, around, autistic individuals or people who have strokes. We just don't. Interestingly, one of the applications of our technology is in the medical space. This Dr. Joe Dusseldorp, he's a facial surgeon, and he helps patients who have facial palsy quantify kind of their rehab, right? Are they regaining their smiles and their facial expressions? And so, ironically, we're applying the technology with autism and with facial palsy and other types of strokes, but we do not have enough examples in our data set. So that's a blind spot. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I will take that back to the team. A while back, we had a kind of a similar question around transgender individuals, because we don't have gender fluidity in our data set. It's not accounted for right now, and that's probably an area for improvement. Yeah.
Excellent. I think, I don't know if Rick Fisher is there to ask his question. Rick, are you there about robots?
I'm here.
Oh, good.
My question, there are some, about 8-inch robots that come out of Japan that have been working with elderly folks doing exercises. And they've been relatively successful, but they don't have EI. Can you talk about giving them AI? EI, sorry.
Yeah, there is a lot of opportunity in the social robotics space. We are kind of the emotion brains in a couple of social robots that are out there. One is a robot called Meibu. It's an MIT spinout and based in the Bay Area. And they send these robots with terminally ill patients. And the robot is supposed to be kind of a companion, right? It ensures that the patient is adhering to medication. If the patient shows signs of depression, then it will flag that to an actual nurse or doctor. So I believe there's a lot of opportunity for social robotics, and it will never take, people often at this point say, oh, but it's gonna take the place of a human. It's not, because humans aren't available to provide this type of care in the first place, right? Rick?
And in many cases, they don't care.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, loneliness is one of the top, especially, I don't know if it's probably, there's a global loneliness pandemic, but especially in Asia, often the number one kind of ask from these types of technologies is because people are lonely and they want to be able to confide and kind of, yeah, confined in these agents, whether they're embodied agents like a robot or even like a chatbot. I mean, I don't know how many people here are familiar with Microsoft's agent chatbot called Xiaowei. It's extremely popular, and the types of conversations people have with this chatbot. I mean, they confide relationship statuses with it, job concerns. It's really, I find it really fascinating. And I'll just reference one more piece of work that I also find really interesting that was done at USC, where they had PTSD patients come in, and some got to see a human doctor and some got to see this emotionally intelligent avatar. And they found that the patients were more forthcoming with the avatar than they were with the human doctor, because they perceived the avatar to be less judgmental. And I just find that, I find that it says more about humans, honestly, than it does about the technology, right?
Well, no, it says a lot about both, and that the robots and the technology have some advantages that they don't have to be judgmental.
Right.
One of the chat comments was, what if I don't want my professor to know that I don't like what he's saying?
I saw that. That's a good comment.
And I think you should, that I feel like people should absolutely own and have control over this data. So if you don't want to consent, then I think you should have the power to do that. We feel strongly about that.
So I just want to move to another question in the chat. Jana, are you there to ask your question about supporting women from the LGBTQIA community?
Yep, I'm here. Hi, my name is Yana. I'm a rising third year CS and design major here at Corey. And my question is, how are Affectiva and Corey College taking visible steps to support women, BIPOC, and members of the LGBTQIA+ community in the tech industry? And how will you ensure that these individuals feel empowered as computer scientists?
Carla, do you want to take that first?
I think we're not doing enough. And certainly probably not enough explicitly. I would welcome, you said Yana, right? Yana?
Yes, Yana.
Yana, I would welcome the opportunity to talk with you. Welcome the opportunity to talk with you about what more we could do. I know that our Dean of Students, Ben Hescott, is passionate about these issues as well, just because he's a wonderful person and also because he is a gay computer scientist, and has been for, his life, and so has faced, I'm sure, interesting types of bias, but I don't have a good answer for you. The mission of computer science for everyone really means that. And certainly one thing we've always done is that if students in some way have a negative co-op experience, that we try to work with the company to make sure that no student will have that negative experience going forward, whether it's because of any kind of demographic or choice in life reason, or just because they gave you a really boring opportunity and so it didn't feel like an opportunity. And so we definitely work with our companies to make sure that each of our students is having a fruitful experience, and don't go posting with companies that are not. But please reach out and let's have a talk and see if there's more that we could be doing.
Yeah, I would like to mirror that too, on the Affectiva side, and just in the tech, in the kind of the business community. As I said, I work with Allraise, and I'm on their steering committee, and we're really committed to doing what we can to improve diversity in tech, especially. I mean, we're focused on the Boston community, but Allraise is a national organization, so we'd love your input. I will also kind of share kind of a more, Affectiva specific story. A few years ago, we had somebody on our team, Forrest, who decided to kind of came out as a transgender individual. So he became she, right? And I'm just very kind of proud of how our team and our company responded to that. We're a very international team. We have a big, I'm originally from Cairo, Egypt, and we have a big Egyptian team where it's not at all part of the norm to talk openly about these things. And so it sparked a lot of dialogue, but also we all came to it with a lot of empathy and a lot of openness. And I feel that Forrest felt that she was really supported. We organized the coming out party for her, and her parents were there. So sometimes it just begins with supporting one person and where you can. So
I would note that Ben, our dean, tells me that we have the highest number of trans students. I don't know what the right way to put those two words together is, in the university. So I think I would hope that everybody feels welcome and supported, and if they don't, then there's work to be done.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for that. I'm sorry that the fire alarm in my house went off. My kids burned grilled cheese downstairs during Masterclass. So, wow, there's a fascinating discussion. I did lose sight of the chat while I was trying to turn the fire alarm off. So I really apologize for that. It's one for the books. Carla and Rana, do you have any last words? We're at the top of the hour and just a few minutes left, but do you have any final comments? Rana, especially, I would love to hear if you have any words of wisdom to aspiring female entrepreneurs on their quest, thinking about different career paths. So if you have anything to say, that'd be great.
I think it all starts with passion. Find something that you're really, really passionate about and you want to change in this world, because that will ensure, it's going to be a tough journey no matter what. But if it's something you really, really care about, you'll have the grit and perseverance to power through. And then support yourself with mentors and champions. I didn't do that initially. I mean, I've had a lot of mentors and people who have supported me throughout my career, but I didn't prioritize being part of a network and a community. I just worked hard. I worked a lot. Like, my solution to everything was to work harder and harder. And I didn't really recognize the power of having a network. So I would encourage, young people to invest in that. It really does help.
Excellent.
And I'll just close us out by saying, Rana, wow, are you inspiring? And I just wish you the best on what is just such an incredible journey. And I'm certainly looking forward to when you and I can grab a coffee in person. It's just such a pleasure to meet you and to hear everything that's going on. And of course, I'm very much delighted I'm getting my own signed copy of your book. So I'm a fan of you and your book and your company, and we're delighted to send you as many students as you can possibly absorb.
Please do. And I found that this book is leading to a lot of, it's a conversation opener. So I look forward to collaborating and partnering more. It's the beginning. But thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. And actually, I have my copy here, as I pointed out at the beginning. And I'm actually thinking that we should host a book club with some students so we can all read it, and then maybe have you back to kind of talk a little bit about some of the topics in the book, and that would get more people interested in that. And maybe we can even teach it in some of our classes. But Rana, you're such an inspiration. Carla, you're such an inspiration. I mean, you're all amazing. You do amazing things. And I think the world is changing so rapidly. It's good to know that you guys are at the forefront of thinking about all of these big global complex problems that we need to solve. So it makes me feel a little bit better. So thank you so much again for taking the time today to talk to us and share your wisdom. And we hope this is the beginning of a longer relationship.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.